Captain Zethra stood on the bridge of her warship and watched the stars disappear. One by one, the bright lights in the sky went dark as something terrible moved between them. The enemy was coming, and there was nothing her people could do to stop it. The Kepler Confederation had been the strongest power in this part of the galaxy for 300 years. Their worlds were beautiful, with cities made of crystal that caught the light of distant suns. Their ships were fast and elegant, painted in silver and blue. Their weapons could cut through steel like butter. For 3 centuries, no enemy had been able to defeat them. But this enemy was different. This enemy was ancient. The Devourer Swarm had come from the dark spaces between the stars. Nobody knew where they came from or why they existed. They looked like metal insects the size of buildings, with red eyes that glowed in the darkness. But they were not alive. They were machines, built long ago by someone or something that was now gone. The swarm moved from star to star like a plague. When they found a world with life, they would cover it completely. They would eat everything: the plants, the animals, the people, even the air and water. They would strip the planet down to bare rock, then move on to the next world. They had been doing this for thousands of years. 3 months ago, the swarm had reached the outer edge of Confederation space. The first world to fall was Nexus 7, a mining colony with 2 million people. The attack lasted only 6 hours. When it was over, Nexus 7 was a dead ball of rock floating in space. Every living thing was gone. The Confederation Navy tried to fight back. They sent their best ships and their bravest soldiers. But the swarm was too strong and too many. For every machine they destroyed, 10 more would take its place. The enemy ships were old, but they worked perfectly. Their weapons could punch holes through the strongest shields. Their armor could take hit after hit without breaking. World after world fell to the swarm. Kalos Prime, with its floating cities in the clouds. It's the garden world of the Shea, where flowers grew as tall as trees. The fortress world of Corinth, protected by energy shields that could stop a nuclear bomb. None of it mattered. Swarm ate them all. Now the enemy was only 2 weeks away from the inner worlds. Soon they would reach Kepler Prime, the capital world where 5 billion people lived. The Confederation Council met in emergency session, day and night, but they had no good answers. Their fleet was broken. Their weapons did not work. They were going to lose. That was when someone suggested sending out a call for help. The idea seemed crazy at first. The Confederation had always been proud and independent. They had never asked other species for help before. But these were desperate times. Desperate times called for desperate actions. The Council decided to send distress signals to every known civilization in the galaxy. Most of them were too far away to help, or too weak to make a difference. But maybe someone would answer. Maybe someone would come. Zethra was in charge of communications that day when the replies started coming in. Most of them were polite, but useless. The Altarian Empire wished them luck, but said they were too busy with their own problems. The crystal beings of Vega said they would pray for the Confederation, but could not send ships. Offered to buy any valuable items the Confederation wanted to sell before they all died. Then a message came from a small blue-green planet called Earth. Zethra had never heard of Earth before. She had to look it up in the computer files. What she found made her laugh, and not in a good way. Earth was a tiny world on the far edge of the galaxy. The people there called themselves humans, and they had only learned to travel between stars 50 years ago. 50 years. That was nothing. Some of the Confederation's warships were older than that. The humans had primitive technology. Their ships were built from metal instead of crystal composites. They used old-fashioned chemical rockets and fusion engines instead of gravity drives. Their weapons were simple plasma cannons and nuclear missiles. A child could have designed better systems, but the message from Earth was different from all. The others, it was short and simple. We got your signal. Help is coming. Hold the line. That was it. No flowery words about sympathy or sorrow. No long explanations about why they could not help. Just a promise that help was coming, and in order to keep fighting. Zethra showed the message to her captain, who showed it to the admiral, who showed it to the council. Some of the council members laughed. Others got angry. Dare these primitive humans think they could help the mighty Confederation? What could a few dozen primitive ships do against the swarm? But Admiral Core, the head of the Navy, was more thoughtful. Any help is better than no help, he said. If these humans want to die fighting beside us, let them come. At least someone in the galaxy still has courage. So the Council sent a reply to Earth. They gave the humans their location and told them where the battle would be. They did not expect much. A few small ships, maybe, some extra weapons or supplies, something to show that the Confederation did not die alone. The swarm kept coming. Every day they got closer to the inner worlds. Every day the defense fleet got smaller as more ships were destroyed or damaged beyond repair. The refugees were flooding in from the outer colonies, bringing stories of horror and death. Zethra tried not to think about what would happen when the swarm reached Kepler Prime. She had family there, her parents, her brother, her young nephew, who wanted to be a starship captain when he grew up. Soon they would all be gone, turned into food for the ancient machines. The humans sent regular updates on their progress. Still coming, they would say. Halfway there, making good time. Their messages were always short and casual, like they were talking about a trip to the grocery store instead of a desperate battle to save an entire civilization. Zethra began to think. The humans did not understand how serious things were. Maybe their translation computers were broken. Maybe they thought this was some kind of training exercise. She tried to explain how dangerous the swarm was, how many ships they had, how powerful their weapons were. The humans just replied, "Understood." "We're prepared." Prepared for what, Zethra wondered. Prepared to die? These primitive people had no idea what they were getting into. When they saw the swarm, they would turn around and run home as fast as their little ships could carry them. But at least they were trying. At least someone in the galaxy cared enough to answer their call for help. Even if the humans could not save the Confederation, they would be remembered as the only ones who tried. The swarm was now 1 week away from Kepler Prime. The swarm arrived on a Tuesday morning. Captain Zethra was drinking her morning tea when the alarms started screaming. She dropped her cup and ran to the bridge of her ship. Outside the windows, space was full of metal monsters. The Devourer swarm stretched across the sky like a disease. There were millions of them, maybe billions. They moved in perfect formation, each machine exactly where it was supposed to be. Their red eyes glowed in the darkness like angry stars. Some were small, no bigger than fighters. Others were huge, the size of cities. All of them had one purpose: to eat everything alive. All ships. Battle stations. Admiral Core's voice came over the radio. "Hey, this is it. This is our last stand." The Confederation fleet was pathetic compared to what was coming at them. 200 ships, maybe less. Most of them were damaged from earlier battles. They'd used up most of their good weapons fighting the swarm at the outer worlds. What they had left was not enough. It's not nearly enough. But they were going to fight anyway. Battle began with the swarm sending forward their scouts. These were the small ones, about the size of normal spaceships. They moved fast and shot beams of red energy that could melt steel. The Confederation ships shot back with their plasma cannons and missile launchers. At first it looked like the defense might work. The Confederation pilots were skilled, and their ships were well designed. They destroyed dozens of enemy scouts. The pretty explosions lit up space like fireworks, but for every enemy ship they killed, 5 more took its place. And behind the scouts came bigger ships. It's much bigger ships. The swarm's heavy units were like flying mountains made of black metal. They had weapons that Zethra had never seen before. One of them shot a purple beam that went right through the shields of the battleship. Magnificent. The battleship just disappeared. 1 second it was there, the next second it was gone. Not even debris was left behind. "What kind of weapon was that?" Zethra asked her science officer. "I don't know, Captain," the young woman replied. Her hands were shaking as she worked at her station. "The energy readings don't make sense. It's like they turned the ship into nothing." The battle went on for hours. Confederation ships fell back slowly, fighting for every meter of space. They used every trick they knew. They hid behind asteroids and jumped out to attack. They used gravity mines and energy fields to slow down the enemy. They rammed their ships into swarm vessels when they ran out of ammunition. Nothing worked. The swarm just kept coming. Zethra watched her friends die one by one. Captain Veltar of the cruiser Dawn's Light was killed when his ship's reactor exploded. Commander Zis of the destroyer Quickstrike died trying to save a group of refugee ships. The carrier Star's glory lasted longer than most, but in the end, the swarm tore it apart like paper. By the end of the first day, half the Confederation fleet was gone. "Any word from the humans?" Admiral Kor asked during a brief break in the fighting. "They sent a message an hour ago," Zethra replied. "They said they're still coming. They told us to keep fighting." The Admiral made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "Keep fighting." Easy for them to say. They're not here watching their people die. The second day was worse than the first. The swarm had brought up their big guns now. These were weapons platforms the size of small moons. They stayed far back and shot planet killer beams at anything that moved. The Confederation ships could not get close enough to fight back. More ships died. The escort carrier, Braveheart, the heavy cruiser, Iron Will, the fast attack ship, Lightning's Edge. Each one took hundreds of good people with it. On the third day, the swarm reached the outer defense ring around Kepler Prime. This was where the Confederation had put their strongest weapons. Giant laser cannons that could destroy a battleship in one shot. Missile platforms with enough firepower to level a city. Energy shields that could stop anything. The swarm went through them like they were made of cardboard. "Sir Zethra's communications." Officer called out. "I'm getting a transmission from the planet. It's the President." President Malkaeth appeared on the main screen. He was an old man with gray fur and tired eyes. Behind him, Zethra could see smoke rising from the capital city. The swarm had started bombing the planet. "Captain Zethra," the President said, "I want to thank you and your crew for everything you've done. You fought bravely against impossible odds. History will remember you." "We're not dead yet, Mr. President," Zethra replied. But she knew it was only a matter of time. "The evacuation ships are ready," the President continued. "We're going to try to save as many people as we can. The government and military leaders will leave first, then the scientists and engineers, then as many civilians as possible." "Where will you go?" Zethra asked. "Wherever we can. Maybe some of the outer colonies survived. Maybe we can rebuild somewhere else. But Kepler Prime is lost. Our civilization is lost." The fourth day brought more death. The swarm sent their boarding parties to capture any ships that were still working. These were smaller machines that could cut through a ship's hull like it was soft cheese. Once they got inside, they would kill everyone on board and take the ship for their own use. Zethra had to blow up 2 of her own ships to keep them from falling into enemy hands. She watched the explosions and tried not to think about the people who had been inside. The 5th day was when the civilians started dying in large numbers. The swarm had landed on Kepler Prime and was spreading across the surface like a metal plague. The news reports were horrible. Entire cities being eaten alive. Millions of people running for their lives. Children crying for their parents who would never come home. "Captain," her communications officer said quietly. "Another message from the humans." "What do they say this time?" Zethra asked. She was so tired she could barely stand. "They say they'll be here tomorrow. They told us to move our ships away from the planet when they arrive." Zethra almost laughed. Tomorrow? What was the point? By tomorrow, there would be nothing left to save. The swarm would have eaten everything. The humans would arrive just in time to see an empty planet full of dead rock. But maybe that was for the best. At least someone would know what happened here. Someone would be able to tell the galaxy that the Kepler Confederation had existed, and that they had fought to the end. On the 6th day, as Zethra watched the last of the evacuation ships leave, the dying planet, she got ready to make her final stand. Her ship was damaged and low on ammunition. Most of her crew was dead or wounded, but she was not going to run. This was her home, and she was going to defend it until the end. The swarm was everywhere now. They covered the planet like a blanket of metal death. Their biggest ships were moving into position around Kepler Prime, getting ready to strip it down to nothing. It's all remaining ships. Admiral Kor's voice came over the radio. He sounded old and tired. Form up for one last attack. We're going to hit them with everything we have left. Zethra looked at her crew. They were all young people who should have had long lives ahead of them. Instead, They were going to die fighting an enemy they could not defeat. "Are you ready?" she asked them. They nodded. They were scared, but they were ready. Zethra was about to give the order to attack when something impossible happened. Space began to tear open. The space around Kepler Prime began to crack like broken glass. Captain Zethra stared at her screens in confusion. She had never seen anything like this before. Reality itself seemed to be splitting apart, showing glimpses of something beyond. Strange lights flickered in the darkness between the cracks. "What's happening?" she asked her science officer. "I don't know, Captain," the young woman replied. Her voice was shaking. "The readings are off the charts. Something is coming through from hyperspace, but it's massive. Much bigger than anything we've ever seen." The cracks in space grew wider. Through them, Zethra could see movement that were too large to be real. Metal and light stretching further than her eyes could follow. Then space exploded open like a flower. It's made of stars. What came through was not a fleet. It was not an armada. It was something so big that Zethra's mind could not understand it at first. Ships poured out of the hyperspace gate like water from a broken dam. Hundreds of ships. Thousands of ships. More ships than there were stars in the sky. The smallest ones were bigger than her battleship. The largest ones were the size of moons. They stretched across space in perfect formations that went on forever. Now, row after row after row of gray metal death machines, all flying in exact lines like they were part of some giant parade. "Dear gods," Admiral Kor whispered over the radio. "What are we looking at?" Zethra tried to count the ships, but gave up after the first 1,000. There were too many. They filled the entire sky, blocking out the stars. Each one looked different from the others, but they all had one thing in common. They looked dangerous. Very dangerous. The ships were not pretty like Confederation vessels. They were built for war and nothing else. No smooth curves or artistic designs. Just thick armor, big guns, and engines that could push them faster than anything should be able to move. They looked like they had been in many battles and won them all. "This is Admiral Chen of the Terran Defense Force," a voice said over the radio. It spoke in perfect Confederation language, but with a strange accent. "We received your distress call. We're here to help, Terran." That meant they were from Earth. These were the humans. Zethra felt her world turn upside down. These primitive people with their metal ships and chemical rockets had just brought the largest fleet she had ever seen. How was that possible? How could a species that had only been traveling in space for 50 years build something like this? "Confederation ships, please move away from the planet," Admiral Chen continued. His voice was calm and relaxed, like he was asking someone to pass the salt at dinner. "We're about to begin cleaning operations." "Cleaning operations?" Zethra thought. What did that mean? "Admiral Chen," she heard Admiral Kor say. "This is Admiral Kor of the Confederation Navy. We weren't expecting such a large force." "Oh, this isn't our main fleet," Admiral Chen replied casually. "This is just the 3rd Expeditionary Force. We were in the area anyway, so we figured we'd swing by and take care of your pest problem." "Pest problem?" Zethra looked at the Devourer. "Swarm that covered half the star system. Billions of ancient killing machines that had destroyed entire civilizations. The humans were calling them pests?" Sir Admiral Chen continued. "We're going to need you to pull your ships back to a safe distance, say about 10 million kilometers. We don't want any friendly fire incidents." Admiral Kor sounded confused. 10 million kilometers? That's very far. How are you planning to engage the enemy from that distance? "Don't worry about it," Admiral Chen said. "We've got this covered. Just sit back and watch the show." The Confederation ships slowly moved away from the planet. Zethra watched the human fleet spread out into attack formation. It was like watching a living thing move. Every ship knew exactly where it was supposed to go. There was no confusion, no hesitation. They moved like they had done this 1,000 times before. The Devourer swarm had noticed the new arrivals. Their ships were turning to face the human fleet. The red eyes of their machines glowed brighter as they prepared to attack. Zethra had seen this before. The swarm always charged straight at their enemies, overwhelming them with numbers and firepower. But something strange happened. The swarm stopped moving. They just floated there in space like they were waiting for something. Zethra had never seen them hesitate before. The ancient machines were always aggressive, always attacking. Why were they just sitting there? Interesting. Admiral Chen said over the radio, "They recognize us. It saves us some time." "What do you mean?" Admiral Kor asked. "Oh, we've fought these guys before," Admiral Chen replied. "About 30 years ago, they tried to invade our home system. Big mistake on their part. Had to chase down the survivors afterward. These must be some of the ones that got away." 30 years ago, Zethra felt her blood turn to ice. The humans had fought the Devourer swarm 30 years ago. But that was impossible. 30 years ago, the humans had barely invented faster-than-light travel. How could they have defeated an enemy that was destroying the Confederation? "We tried to be polite about it," Admiral Chen continued. "Sent them messages telling them to leave our space. They didn't listen. So we had to explain things to them in a language they understood. The human fleet began to move forward, not fast. Not rushing into battle like the Confederation ships did. They moved slowly and steadily, like they had all the time in the world. As they got closer, Zethra could see details on their ships that made her stomach turn. The human ships were covered in scars, burn marks from energy weapons, dents from missile impacts, and patches of newer metal where old damage had been repaired. These ships had been in so many battles that they looked like veterans of 100 wars, but they were still flying, still fighting, still winning. "All units, weapons free," Admiral Chen ordered. "Standard extermination pattern. Try not to damage the planet too much. The locals are still living there." What happened next was not a battle. It was an execution. The human ships opened fire all at once. The weapons they used were unlike anything Zethra had ever seen. Beams of light that seemed to bend space itself. Missiles that disappeared and reappeared inside enemy ships. Cannons that shot balls of pure energy that exploded like tiny suns. The Devourer swarm tried to fight back. They charged forward with their usual tactics, sending waves of smaller ships to overwhelm the enemy. But the human weapons cut through them like a hot knife through butter. Enemy ships simply vanished as the human beams touched them. "Chen to all units." Admiral Chen's voice came over the radio. He sounded bored. "Remember, we want to save some for study. The science boys back home are always asking for fresh samples." Samples, Zethra thought. These humans were talking about the most dangerous enemy in the galaxy like they were collecting bugs for a museum. The battle continued for exactly 17 minutes. Zethra timed it. In 17 minutes, the human fleet destroyed an enemy force that had taken the Confederation 6 months to barely slow down. They did it without losing a single ship. They did it without even breathing hard. When it was over, the space around Kepler Prime was empty, except for floating pieces of metal that had once been swarm ships. The planet was still there, still mostly intact. The humans had been careful not to damage it too much. "Kepler Prime, this is Admiral Chen," the human commander said. "Your planet is secure. We're sending down medical teams and repair crews. Don't be alarmed if you see our people. They're here to help." Zethra sat in her command chair and tried to understand what she had just witnessed. A fleet that had appeared out of nowhere. Weapons that could destroy ancient enemies like they were nothing. People who talked about the most dangerous force in the galaxy like it was a minor inconvenience. Who were these humans? What were they really? Why had they let the galaxy think they were primitive and harmless? "Captain," her communications officer said quietly. "Admiral Chen is asking to speak with you personally." Zethra straightened her uniform and tried to look professional, put him through. The face that appeared on her screen was not what she expected. Admiral Chen looked human enough to eyes, a nose, a mouth. But there was something in his eyes that made Zethra's skin crawl. He looked like someone who had seen terrible things and done worse things. He looked like a predator pretending to be tame. "Captain Zethra," Admiral Chen said with a smile. "I've heard good things about you. Your people fought bravely against impossible odds. We respect that." "Thank you, Admiral Zethra," managed to say we ... "Okay, we owe you our lives." "Don't mention it," Admiral Chen replied. "Happy to help. By the way, we'll be sticking around for a while to make sure all the swarm remnants are cleaned up." "Can't have them bothering the neighbors. The screen went dark, leaving Zethra alone with her thoughts. Outside her window, the human ships continued their work. They moved through space like they owned it, checking every asteroid and moon for hidden enemies. The Confederation had been saved, but Zethra was beginning to wonder if that was a good thing. 3 days after the battle, Captain Zethra was still trying to understand what had happened. The human ships were everywhere now. They moved through the Kepler system like they owned it, checking every planet and moon for hidden swarm units. Their work was thorough and efficient. When they found enemy machines hiding in asteroid fields or on the dark sides of planets, they destroyed them without mercy. But it was not just their military power that amazed Zethra. It was everything else. The humans had brought repair ships that could fix a damaged battleship in ours. They had medical ships that could heal wounds the Confederation doctors said were impossible to treat. They had construction ships that were already rebuilding the cities on Kepler Prime. Zethra watched through her telescope as human engineers worked on the capital city. They moved with the same casual efficiency they had shown in battle. Machines lifted broken buildings like they were toys. Force fields held back the rubble while workers cleared the streets. In just 3 days, they had repaired more damage than the Confederation could have fixed in 3 years. Captain Her. Communications officer called out. Admiral Chen is requesting permission to come aboard. Zethra felt her stomach tighten. She had been avoiding the human commander since the battle ended. Something about him made her nervous. But she could not refuse to meet with the man who had saved her people. Tell him he's welcome aboard, she said. Admiral Chen arrived in a small shuttle that looked like nothing special. It was gray and plain, without any decorations or fancy designs, but when Zethra's sensors scanned it, the readings made no sense. The shuttle seemed to be made of materials that should not exist. The Admiral himself looked ordinary enough. He was a middle-aged human with brown hair and kind eyes. He wore a simple uniform without many medals or decorations. He smiled when he met Zethra and shook her hand like an old friend. "Thank you for having me aboard," he said. "I hope you don't mind, but I brought some gifts." The gifts were medical supplies and food that the Confederation desperately needed. But when Zethra looked at them closely, she realized they were far beyond anything her people could make. The medical equipment could diagnose diseases that Confederation science did not even know existed. The food was perfectly preserved and would stay fresh for decades. "This is very generous," Zethra said. "But I have to ask, where did all this come from? Your planet is supposed to be small and primitive." Admiral Chen laughed. It was a warm, friendly sound, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Oh, Earth is still a small planet, but we've been busy over the past 50 years. He walked to the window of her ship and looked out at his fleet. "You know, Captain, your people did very well against the swarm. Most species just run away when they first encounter them." 6 months, Zethra repeated. "To defeat them? The first time? About 3 hours," Admiral Chen said casually. "But that was when they brought their main fleet to Seoul. Millions of ships, including some of their biggest world eaters. We had to use some of our more serious weapons." Zethra felt dizzy. 3 hours against their main fleet? "Well, we had been preparing for something like that for a while," Admiral Chen explained. "They reached Earth. We had been tracking their movements across the galaxy for decades." "Decades?" Zethra could barely speak. "But you only achieved faster than light travel 50 years ago." Admiral Chen smiled again.
"Say this time."
The cold look in his eyes did not go away. "Captain, who told you that?" The question hit Zethra like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to answer, then realized she did not know. The information about human technology was in all the galactic databases. Everyone knew that Earth was a primitive world with basic technology. It was common knowledge. "The galactic databases," she said weakly. "Ah, yes, the databases." Admiral Chen nodded. "We may have contributed some information to those databases ourselves. It's amazing how easy it is to spread false information when people want to believe it." Zethra sat down heavily in her chair. "You've been lying to the entire galaxy." "Not lying," Admiral Chen corrected. "Just being selective about what we share. You see, Captain, Humans learned a long time ago that it's better to be underestimated than feared. When people think you're weak, they leave you alone. When they know you're strong, they either try to destroy you or use you. He walked over to her computer terminal and touched the screen. Somehow, his fingerprint was accepted by the Confederation security system. New information began appearing on the display. "These are the real facts about human expansion," Admiral Chen said. "We didn't just achieve faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. We perfected it 50 years ago. We've actually been traveling between stars for over 200 years. The data on the screen made Zethra feel sick. Star maps showing human colonies spread across half the galaxy. Technology reports describing weapons that could crack planets in half. Military records listing battles against dozens of different enemies. We've been watching the galaxy for a very long time," Admiral Chen continued. "Learning about different species, studying their strengths and weaknesses, making friends where we could, eliminating threats where we had to." "Eliminating threats?" Zethra whispered. "Oh yes," Admiral Chen said. His voice was still friendly, but now it sounded like ice. The Vrex Empire, for example. They used to enslave other species and sell them on the galactic market. We had to have a talk with them about that. Zethra remembered the Vrex Empire. They had been one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy until about 20 years ago. Then they had simply disappeared. No one knew what had happened to them. The Quorum Collective was another problem, Admiral Chen went on. They believed in something they called genetic purity. They thought any species that was different from them should be wiped out. We couldn't allow that kind of thinking to spread. The Quorum Collective had vanished 15 years ago. Entire galaxy had wondered where they went. And of course, there was the Devourer Swarm, Admiral Chen finished. Ancient machines that ate entire civilizations. Zethra stared at the human admiral. This friendly, ordinary-looking man was describing the destruction of entire galactic powers like he was talking about the weather. "How many species have you destroyed?" she asked. "Destroyed? We're not monsters. Just remove the ones that threaten galactic peace and stability. Most of them are relocated to nice, comfortable planets where they can't hurt anyone." "Relocated," Zethra repeated. "Of course, some species choose to fight. Rather than be relocated," Admiral Chen admitted. "In those cases, we have to defend ourselves. It's unfortunate, but sometimes necessary." Zethra looked out at the human fleet again. Now she realized they were something much more frightening. They were gardeners, and the galaxy was their garden. They decided which species could stay and which ones had to go. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because your people deserve?" "To know the truth," Admiral Chen replied. "The Confederation has always been peaceful and reasonable. You don't attack other species without cause. You don't enslave people or commit genocide. You're the kind of neighbors we like to have." "And if we weren't?" Zethra asked, though she was afraid of the answer. Admiral Chen's smile never wavered. "Then we would have arrived too late to save you from the swarm. A terrible tragedy, but these things happen in space. So many ways for a civilization to die." The message was clear. The humans had not come to save the Confederation out of kindness. They had come because the Confederation was useful to them. If the Confederation had been a threat, the humans would have let the swarm destroy them. "Don't look so worried, Captain," Admiral Chen said. "Like I said, we're the good guys. We just want a peaceful, stable galaxy where everyone can live happily. We provide protection and assistance to our friends. All we ask in return is cooperation." "Cooperation?" Zethra said. "Nothing too difficult," Admiral Chen assured her. "Maybe some help with resources when we need them. Standard diplomatic arrangements between friendly powers." Zethra understood. The humans were not asking. They were telling. The Confederation could cooperate willingly, or they could be relocated like all the other species that had caused problems. "I think my government will be very interested in cooperating," Zethra said carefully. "I'm sure they will, Admiral Chen." "Agreed. Your leaders seem like smart people. They'll understand that cooperation is much better than the alternative." The Admiral stood up and walked toward the door. "I should get back to work. We still have a lot of swarm remnants to clean up. Can't have them bothering the neighbors." He paused at the door and looked back. "Oh, and Captain," this conversation never happened. The official story is that Earth sent a small relief force to help against the swarm. Nothing more than that. The galaxy isn't ready to know the whole truth yet. After he left, Zethra sat alone in her quarters for a long time. Outside her window, the human ships continued their work. They moved through space with the confidence of apex predators, masters of everything they surveyed. 6 months later, Captain Zethra stood in the rebuilt capital city of Kepler Prime and watched the humans work. They had kept their promise. The planet was not just repaired, it was better than it had ever been. The new buildings were stronger and more beautiful than the old ones. The air was cleaner, the water was purer. Even the soil was richer than before, thanks to human technology that could fix damaged ecosystems in weeks. The people of Kepler Prime loved their human helpers. Children followed the human workers around, fascinated by their strange machines and friendly smiles. Adults praised the efficiency and kindness of their rescuers. Everyone agreed that the humans were wonderful allies. Only Zethra knew the truth. She watched a group of human engineers installing something they called a communication relay in the center of the city. They said it would help with emergency broadcasts and improve planetary communications. But Zethra had learned to read the real specifications. The device could monitor every conversation on the planet and jam any transmission the humans did not want sent. "Beautiful work, isn't it?" a voice said behind her. Zethra turned to see Admiral Chen approaching. He wore civilian clothes now and looked like any ordinary human tourist. But she could see the bodyguards trying to blend in with the crowd around him. They were not very good at pretending to be normal people. "Yes, very beautiful," Zethra agreed. She had learned not to argue with the humans about anything important. "The president seems very happy with our reconstruction efforts," Admiral Chen said. "He signed the new trade agreements yesterday. Very reasonable terms, I think." Had read those agreements. They gave humans access to every Confederation resource they wanted, at prices the humans set themselves. In return, the Confederation would receive protection and advanced technology. It was a fair deal, as long as you ignored the fact that refusing was not an option. He also agreed to lease us some land for our new embassy, Admiral Chen continued. "Just a small compound, nothing too intrusive." The small compound covered 50 square kilometers and included a spaceport that could handle the largest human warships. It was officially an embassy, but it looked more like a military base to Zethra. "I'm sure it will be very helpful for diplomatic relations," she said. Admiral Chen smiled. "Oh, it will be. We're planning to station a small fleet here permanently. Just to make sure nothing like the swarm incident happens again." A small fleet. 300 ships, including some of the massive dreadnoughts that could destroy planets. The humans called it a protective presence. Everyone else would call it an occupation force, if they were brave enough to say it out loud. Zethra said carefully, "May I ask you something?" "Course, Captain. We're friends now. Why do you do this?" "Your people have technology that could solve every problem in the galaxy. You could rule openly and no one could stop you. Why hide?" "Why pretend to be helpful neighbors?" Admiral Chen looked thoughtful. "You know, Captain, that's a very good question. The answer is simple. It's much easier this way." He gestured toward the busy street around them. "Look at these people. They're happy, they feel safe, they think they're free, they work hard, they follow the rules, and they don't cause trouble. Everyone wins." "But they're not really free," Zethra pointed out. "Freedom is overrated," Admiral Chen replied. "Most people don't want real freedom. Real freedom means making hard choices and accepting responsibility for the consequences. Most people would rather have someone else make the difficult decisions for them." Zethra watched a group of Confederation children playing with a human soldier. The soldier was teaching them how to throw a ball, and they were laughing together. It looked innocent and friendly. "What about the species that choose to fight you?" she asked. "What about them?" Admiral Chen shrugged. "They make their choice, we make ours. The galaxy is a big place, but it's not big enough for everyone to do whatever they want. And you decide who gets to stay." "Someone has to," Admiral Chen said. "Nature abhors a vacuum, Captain. If we don't maintain order, someone else will. And trust me, we're much nicer rulers than most species would be." Zethra thought about the vanished empires and relocated peoples. She wondered where they had been taken. She wondered if they were still alive. Vrex, the Quorum, The others? Where are they now? Safe, Admiral Chen said. Comfortable. Some of them are even happy once they adjusted to their new circumstances. We don't believe in genocide, Captain. We believe in management. Management, Zethra repeated. Every species has something to contribute, Admiral Chen explained. The Vreks were excellent miners before they got involved in the slave trade. Now they mine asteroids in a nice quiet system where they can't hurt anyone. The Corum were brilliant scientists when they weren't busy trying to wipe out other species. They're working on some fascinating projects for us now, as slaves. As employees, Admiral Chen corrected. They're paid fairly for their work. They have comfortable homes. And good food. You just don't get to leave their assigned planets without permission. Zethra felt sick. The humans had turned entire civilizations into prisoners with jobs. Don't look so upset, Captain, Admiral Chen said gently. The alternative was much worse for them. And look how well things worked out for the Confederation. You cooperated from the beginning, so you get to keep your freedom and your dignity. Your people still make their own decisions about most things. Most things, Zethra said. The important things, Admiral Chen agreed. Foreign policy, military matters, resource allocation, we help with those decisions now, but everything else is still up to you. A human transport ship was landing at the new spaceport. Zethra watched more human diplomats and advisors disembarking. Soon there would be humans in every important government office, every military command, every major corporation. They would be helpful and friendly and impossible to refuse. How long have you been planning this? Zethra asked. Planning what? Admiral Chen looked genuinely confused. This, the Galactic Empire, the secret conquest of every major civilization. Admiral Chen laughed. Captain, we're not conquerors. We're just gardeners. Gardeners? The galaxy is like a garden, Admiral, Chen explained. Sometimes plants grow wild and start choking out their neighbors. Sometimes weeds spread and damage the whole ecosystem. A good gardener removes the problem plants and helps the healthy ones grow. And you decide which plants are healthy. Someone has to, Admiral Chen said again. We've been watching the galaxy for a long time, Captain. We've seen what happens. When aggressive species are left unchecked, we've seen entire sectors turn into wastelands because no one was willing to stop the bullies. Zethra looked up at the sky, where human ships moved like mechanical stars. So you appointed yourselves as the galaxy's protectors. We appointed ourselves as the galaxy's managers, Admiral Chen corrected. Protection is just part of the job. Human child ran past them, chasing a ball with some Confederation children. The human child looked exactly like any other kid, happy, innocent, full of energy. It was hard to remember that this child belonged to a species that had secretly conquered half the galaxy. What happens to species that refuse to be managed? Zethra asked. Admiral Chen's expression grew sad. Sometimes gardeners have to remove plants that can't be saved. It's not pleasant, but it's necessary for the health of the whole garden. And if the Confederation had refused your help, then the swarm would have destroyed you, Admiral, Chen said simply. We would have arrived too late to save anyone. Terrible tragedy, but sometimes these things happen in space. Zethra understood. The humans would have let the swarm finish its work, then moved in to claim the empty worlds. No muss, no fuss, no messy battles against desperate defenders. You're monsters, she said quietly. No, Captain, Admiral Chen replied. We're managers. Monsters destroy things for pleasure. Only destroy things that threaten the stability of our garden. He checked his watch and smiled. I should get going. The President is expecting me for dinner, and it's rude to keep friends waiting. Admiral Chen walked away, leaving Zethra alone with her thoughts. Around her, the rebuilt city hummed with activity. Human and Confederation workers labored side by side on new projects. Children played in parks that were cleaner and safer than ever before. Everything looked peaceful and prosperous. But Zethra knew the truth now. The Confederation was no longer free. They were pets in humanity's galactic garden, protected and cared for as long as they behaved themselves. Their children would grow up in a universe where humans made all the important decisions. Where stepping out of line meant disappearing like the Vrex and the Quorum, the humans had won the ultimate victory. They had conquered the galaxy without anyone even realizing they were at war. They had turned themselves into the indispensable protectors of civilizations that never knew they needed protecting. And the worst part was that most people would be happy with the arrangement. They would trade their freedom for safety, their independence for prosperity. They would thank their human managers for keeping them safe from dangers they never knew existed. Zethra walked back to her apartment through streets filled with grateful citizens and helpful human advisors. Tomorrow, she would file her report, praising the reconstruction efforts and recommending closer cooperation.